This is part 3 of the video lecture on chapter 5. We ended part 2 talking about the footprint of wealthy countries versus developed countries, and how as you are a poor country and then you transition to a wealthy country, you can see that the fossil fuels become one of the larger increases. And you can see that this is a big problem because we put more stress on natural resources as we become more wealthy as a country or as a nation. So human resource use, there's also other important terms. Biocapacity, this is the area and quality of land to supply resources. When populations exceed biocapacity, when the ecosystem's goods must be imported, we're at that point where we import most of our goods. It's estimated the world's countries are running beyond their global biocapacity. Don't forget, we import a lot. This map compares the ecological footprint of the average citizens of each country to the average worldwide biocapacity available to each person. In the wealthy nations, the average footprint exceeds the worldwide biocapacity, and in poorer nations, the average footprint is less than the worldwide biocapacity. There has been talk about trying to come up with a new way to determine the impacts of the environment on the environment. Is that maybe we need to use a different calculation. And this is what we call the IPAT, and the equation equals the impact equals the population multiplied by the affluence of the country multiplied by the technology. And so the population, which is the size, the growth, and the distribution, and then the A is that individual consumption of each individual, and the T represents the technology. We would multiply all those together to get our impact on the environment. Although some technologies improve the environment, the T in the IPAT equation represents the technologies that, of course, are destructive to the environment. It's a conceptual model. It's not designed to calculate numerical values, but it is a way that we could potentially calculate what our impact is on the environment. And so this is just showing you kind of the ability of the Earth's environment and natural resources to help future generations meet their needs. Depends not only on how the population grows, but also how our demand for resources change. And so we need to shift our thought process from non-renewable resources to renewable resources. And so you can see here, the world's population was at 6.5 billion, but it's now way over that. So we're almost at this point. The definition of a sufficient level of well-being may decrease by 2050. And then, of course, when the world population hits 13 billion, there will have to be a radical shift in the major consumers modifying their behavior and attitudes towards lifestyles. This might mean that we have to build vertical farms, and we have to reuse water, and we have to collect rainwater. There's just a million things that we could be doing. We might have to decrease the size of our houses and decrease the kind of cars that we drive, all sorts of ways. Now, there has been a push to manage population growth, and this is through family planning. We extensively talk about the One China Policy Act that is in this module, so you'll read all about that. And we also have, of course, people have tried to go into areas and talk about birth control, but of course, with cultural and strong religious beliefs, sometimes it's really hard to talk about population growth. And the main reason it's very hard to talk about population growth is because people feel that population is an infringement on your freedom. So the minute someone tells you how many children you should have, it infringes upon your personal freedom. And the United Nations, and remember Garrett Hardin talked about this in his article, the United Nations specifically talked about that controlling population growth is an infringement, and you should be allowed to have as many children as you want. But we need to educate people that having as many children as you want also puts a strain on how many resources we have available. So these are 3 examples of ways that people have tried to manage population. China, the One China policy, but of course there was a lot of problems with that and social consequences. Remember, it was It was redacted in the fall of 2015, but that doesn't mean that those social consequences won't be felt in China for a long time. Mexico has really tried to decrease their population through communication, education, counseling, and contraceptive use. Even though it is a predominantly Catholic country, they have tried to implement in there that contraceptives is an okay path to take. India, of course, has had tried similar techniques, but of course they're not as successful, and one of the main reasons is because women just really aren't looked at as a main part of society. So that's a big issue that in India we're going to have to overcome. Also, rape is very high in India, so having children out of rape is definitely very high, a high statistic in India. So this is one of the big things we have to overcome. The impact, so this graph just shows you the impact of the One China policy, which was implemented in 1978 and, of course, redacted in the fall of 2015. And one of the things that people are worried about is that once this has been removed, will China's population explode? I'm not sure. A lot of people say it will, but it'll be interesting to see what the future holds for China in terms of population growth. Remember, the U.S. is in negative. Will soon be in negative population growth, and so we've stabilized our population. Whether that's good or bad is another thought process. For the economy, it's not a good thing, but we might need to change our mindsets on how our economy grows and what we use to grow our economy. All right, so this ends part 3 of the population of the lectures on Chapter 5 population.